Predict, pick, and prevail in your fantasy football leagues with Nick Giacobbe and Nick Cap. From breakouts to busts, superstars to sleepers, these are the guys that will help you achieve fantasy glory. This is the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast.
Welcome everybody. Week 3 is done. We are on to week 4, and this is the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast, where we give you our predictions, our picks, with the hopes that we help you prevail throughout week 4 and the rest of the 2023 fantasy football season. I'm your host, Nick Giacobbe. Joining me is my partner in crime, Nick Cap. Nick, we're 3 weeks in. We're starting to see some trends from teams, from players, from a fantasy standpoint. And I hate to say this, but we're basically 1/5-ish of the way done with the season. 1/6, I should say. We have 18 weeks. But how are we feeling coming out of week 3?
Week 3 was interesting. I mean, you had some normal games, your everyday close matchup, and then you have your Denver Broncos and that coaching staff who lost an all-time offensive coach in Nathaniel Hackett and gained an even better all-time offensive coach supposedly in Sean Payton, and you know that's going to fix that offense. And in a game where he allows 70 points, only puts up 20.
Well, here's the thing. I remember the stat last year that if the Broncos had scored more than 17 points, I think in all their games, they would have had a positive record or something. So surely the defense is not the problem. And there's no way that defense gave up and like a close to an NFL record. They're very close to an NFL record. But I digress, and we will talk about that from a fantasy football standpoint, everything else on this show. So thank you all that are joining us live. It is a Tuesday night. We're giving you a show once a week on a Monday or a Tuesday. We're going to go live. Then I will post it on the podcasting platforms and the YouTube. But if you're watching live, it's the best way to get your information before your waiver wire kicks off and before week 4 kind of kicks off. So we are going to do our waiver segment first, giving you the top players that you should target on your waiver wire tomorrow morning at 3:30 a.m. Eastern time. And then we'll do our week 3 recap, recapping every single game, the injuries that happened, our biggest takeaways, and how it's going to help or hurt your fantasy teams for the rest of the NFL season. So before we get into all that, some plugs that I always like to give. If you're watching live, first off, thank you for joining. Please comment. Please share your questions. We'll be happy to answer them anytime throughout the show. And share that link. If you're on Twitter, drop a retweet. If you're on Facebook, drop a share. If you're on YouTube, I think you could share it. Share that link with your friends and help us grow a little bit of a live audience every single time we go live. If this is your first time listening or watching us, thank you so much. We have a show that comes out every single week on our YouTube and audio streaming platforms. That show will be on Mondays or Tuesdays, depending on me and Nick's schedule. I do have a pretty busy work schedule for you guys that do know my job. And as for Nick, he's getting ready to welcome in his first child. So next week, we might have a little minion on the show. We'll see where life takes Nick in the next week. But yeah, Nick is almost a father. So congratulations to him in advance. You can find the show every week on all audio streaming platforms, iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcast, Anchor, basically anywhere where you can find a podcast. You can find us, the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. If you prefer to watch and listen to the show, go to our YouTube channel, PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. That's how you watch us live right now. If you're watching us live, if not, you can watch the replay of it, or I'll actually upload the live version to our YouTube channel so it shows on our videos and our live as well. If you're watching this video live or the replay version of it, make sure to smash that like button on the video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that little bell icon so you get notifications every time we go live or post a video. Please interact with us on social media. Twitter, TikTok, Instagram is PrimeTimeFFPod. Facebook and YouTube is PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. We will not be live on Sundays to answer your questions for the time being. However, we will answer your questions on Twitter. I do it every single Sunday morning. So please hit us up on PrimeTimeFFPod on Twitter if you do have any questions on Sunday mornings. We have a London game this week, so I don't think I'll be answering your questions at 7:30. I do work late on a Saturday night, so if you fire off questions for the London game, yeah, I'm sorry, guys. I will not be up at 7:30 to answer those questions. I probably won't be up to watch the game, if I'm being honest with you. All right, let's start the show off with our waiver wire for week 4. So we're going to go position by position and talk about some of the players you might want to add for your waiver wire. So for quarterbacks, I have CJ Stroud owned in 11.2% of ESPN leagues. He's back-to-back performances with 20-plus fantasy points. He has some favorable matchups coming up. So, Nick, what are your thoughts on adding CJ Stroud as possibly a backup or maybe a starter in a 14-man league where Aaron Rodgers was your starting quarterback?
Sure. I think he's definitely worth the roster spot at this point. He's looked very poised, very calm, very collected. That receiving core, who we had a ton of doubts on. I remember Nick and I, when before the season started, we said, like, who the hell are we going to talk about when we do the segment where we debate which two players on a roster have better fantasy value in your drafts? And we both said, like, none of these guys on the Texans have been valuable. Like, what receiver are you going to compare to Dameon Pierce? And apparently both of them, Tank Dell and Nico Collins, have come in big, and that Texans offense has looked great through 3 weeks. For me, I think CJ Stroud should be on rosters if it's a 2-quarterback league. He's somebody that you're pretty much going to be starting week to week based on the matchup. This week they host the Pittsburgh Steelers. Not the easiest matchup in the world, and Tomlin might be tough on him. But again, if it's a good game script and he's playing in that pocket and Laramie Tunsil can get some good blocks on Watt, you're looking at a good formula for him to have another good game. So for me, I think he's definitely worth rostering at this point, and probably the only rookie quarterback you'll roster this year.
Yeah, I'm with Nick on that. So we do have a question here from Dominic. Thanks for joining. Would you trade T. Higgins, Mostert, and Christian Watson for Etienne and Chase in a 10-man PPR? I kind of have to see your I'd have to see your team, but I think you're getting, I mean, Nick might disagree with me on this, but I think you're getting the better running back. And I think you're getting the better receiver. I kind of like that trade. I don't know what your thoughts are. I know Mostert had a huge week, but Mostert is known to be a little bit brittle. David Achane, I forget exactly what his new pronunciation is, but you have a rookie who's on the up and up as well. So what do you think, Nick? I think I would make this move depending on my team. I like getting the star power, and I think you're getting star power here.
I always say, who's the best player you're getting out of the trade? And if you can turn T. Higgins and Raheem Mostert, who was Raheem Mostert the last 2 weeks, into, I know wasn't great the first 2 weeks, but proved it in a game where Joe Burrow looked awful, that he can still have fantasy value and is an elite receiver in this league. Those two, for that upgrade alone, makes the trade worth it. And then you swap out Christian Watson, who still has not practiced so far this season, for a much better running back. So for me, I think it's a no-brainer for you.
He hasn't practiced, and he has a hamstring injury, which is going to linger. And Jordan loves finding other targets. There's no guarantee that Christian Watson comes in here and is the wide receiver one and boasts 100-yard games every week. And he could. We could be totally wrong on that. But again, I would go for this. And Etienne's been pretty productive too. I know he had a touchdown robbed yesterday from Tank Bigsby, but pretty sure Etienne's had like 12 or 15 plus fantasy points in each game. So he's been productive. So I would make that trade. Deshaun says, what's up? What is up, Deshaun? Going back to waiver talk here, talking about CJ Stroud, I agree with Nick. I think even in like 10-man leagues where you roster 2 quarterbacks, you do want a backup. Trust me. I think he's very rosterable at this point. I played him in favor of Joe Burrow this week in a league, and I'm happy that I did. I wish I had done it in a second league. Instead, I played Russell Wilson. I'm all for it. Then we have Baker Mayfield. He's rostered in 15.7% of leagues. He had his worst game of the season last night against a very tough and stingy Philadelphia Eagles defense. Well, it was pouring rain. He only had 10 fantasy points, but doesn't really worry me. He has a tough matchup this next week against New Orleans, then the bye. Then after that, he has Detroit, Atlanta, and Houston. So, Nick, what are your thoughts about picking up Baker Mayfield as your backup?
I said it, after 2 weeks, that he's a guy I'm comfortable rostering. Didn't want him for the Eagles, and I don't want him for that division matchup against the Saints, but Detroit, easy defense. Atlanta should be an easy defense. And Houston has looked pretty good through 3 weeks, but for the passing game, no one in that secondary is blocking Mike Evans. So for me, I think that's a guy that you can have and should have on your lineup. Again, another guy like Stroud, you're only really going to play based on the matchup. But right now, he's looked really good. He looks poised, and that offense has been rolling. So the rain stopped him, but that's not going to be the case week to week. So I think he's worth a roster spot.
Moving on to running backs, Devon, not David. I'm sorry, I said David. My mind slipped. It's been a long day, guys. Devon Achane is only owned in 16.5% of leagues. He had 18 touches for 203 yards and 2 touchdowns. Raheem Mostert's stats are also incredible. I think Achane is going to be the number 1 waiver add this week. I'm pretty sure of that. So, Nick, what are your thoughts on him? Being your number 1 waiver claim.
I think he's worth it for sure. I mean, Mostert, you hate to say it, but it's a matter of time before he misses time. And Achan, that's the correct
Achan, that's the correct one. Okay,
Achan did say that he is going to be like he will be the guy at some point this year, right? Like I drafted him in multiple leagues for this reason. And I always say, do not drop your rookie running backs and receivers after 2 weeks. Give it to the week 3, because that's when you'll really see if they're still not getting workload. So for me, like a guy like Tank Bigsby, I'm willing to cut for a guy like A-Chain. Zach Charbonnet, a guy a lot of people believed in. He looks like he's just going to be the handcuff running back to Kenneth Walker.
And the thing is, Charbonnet looks good, but Kenneth Walker looks really good. So
of course,
you're just not gonna get touches.
Exactly. So A-Chan clearly has an opportunity in this offense to become the number 1. So he's got to be the number 1 running back target, if not the number 1 on the entire.
And there's a chance that the Dolphins are the highest scoring offense in the league this season.
There's a chance.
So yeah, he has to be your number 1 waiver target. I actually, somebody dropped him in a league where I actually needed a running back, and I scooped him up last week. So good job. Some other running back targets in case you have a late waiver and do want to stash. Same guys as last week because they're still not really owned. Rashawn Johnson only owned in 33.4% of leagues in the Taylor Swift Bowl. He did out carry Khalil Herbert, but nobody probably saw that again because Taylor Swift was everywhere. And then Tajay Spears only owned in 15.8% of leagues. I think he may have outscored Henry. I think he may have even outsnapped him. I think I could be right on those two things. So what do you think of these two players, Nick? Do you favor one over the other? Do you think they should be on rosters? Where do you kind of stand on this?
Tajay is definitely the one I want between the two. As fine as Johnson looks, I do think Herbert is the better running back. I think Fields is the best ball carrier out of that backfield, and that offense has been absolutely horrendous. I mean,
putrid.
They've been the worst offense in the NFL, and it's not even close. He's not going to have a lot of scoring opportunity. They're not going to be on the field much, and if they ever get control of a game, they're going to manage the clock. So I think you're looking at a team that's going to win 2-3 games this year and not have a lead and not have a game script that's going to be good enough for him to be a good fantasy play. So even if you do like the talent, the situation is probably the worst in the league for any running back.
I'll take Rashawn Johnson over Zach Charbonnet or Tank Bigsby right now because I still think he has the chance to be one of the 32 starting running backs in the league. So those are guys I would cut him for. On to some wide receivers. Tank Dell, who was on our waiver target list last week, so hopefully you listened to the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast, but he's only owned in 23.3% of leagues. So, there you go. He had back-to-back games with 20-plus fantasy points. Your thoughts on the rookie for the Houston Texans?
This might be the only guy that I would consider taking over A-Chan on the waivers this week, just because for multiple weeks he's had this consistency. Stroud has looked consistently like a very good rookie quarterback and a stable option for him moving forward. The division is very weak, so you are going to have very favorable matchups against favorable secondaries. The game script in that AFC and with that schedule is going to be CJ Stroud having to pass for 300 yards.
Well, the Texans are not going to lose, they're not going to win, I should say, a lot of games. So they're going to be down in a lot of games. So there's going to be a lot of opportunity to score for wide receivers.
Exactly. So for me, it's a Tank Dell versus A-Chan debate for who the number 1 is on the week. I do lean Tank Dell because I do think as good as the Dolphins are going to be, it was the easiest matchup in the league. I mean, it was an absolute blowout game. You're not going to see 4 touchdowns from your backup running back that many times, and you're waiting on the running back 1 really to go down. But there are concerns with Ahmed coming back, and I know Jeff Wilson, if he returns this season.
I'm not scared of either of them.
I'm not scared of them.
I think we see a 1 and a 2 in Miami here, and I think that's it. I think McDaniel's.
My only concern is the depth chart before the season was supposed to be Jeff Wilson as the 1 and Ahmed as the 3 and A-Chan as the 4. Now, I do think that they've proven that should not be the case, but you never know. Mike McDaniel runs that Shanahan offense where you don't know who the back's going to be every week. So for me, I do think Tank Dell on a week-to-week basis will put up more consistency, even though his ceiling might not be as high.
If you're like me and went super duper 0 running back, A-Chan has to be your number 1. That's kind of where I'm at. So for the Chargers, Mike Williams did go down with a pretty serious injury. I think it was the ACL, out for this season. So that means somebody's going to step into his place. Nick's guy, Joshua Palmer, who's been high on forever, is only owned in 0.7% of leagues and had 14 fantasy points this week. I forget when Mike Williams went out. Was it third quarter?
He went out late in the game. He still had a monster day.
Joshua Palmer had a good day as well. And rookie Quentin Johnson owned at 46.6% of leagues, but has not produced through the first few weeks. And the issue is that he hasn't been able to get on the field enough because you have so much talent in front of him.
Yeah.
In terms of, 3 wide receivers, because Joshua Palmer's a guy that they have so really 3 wide receivers ahead of him. And then obviously, Eckler, who was out the last 2 weeks, but, still Austin Eckler is a Charger. So, Nick, if you do have the opportunity to pick up one of these Chargers, which one would you rather pick up?
I think Palmer's looked really good in games without Mike Williams, but Quentin Johnston, they used too valuable of a draft pick for them to just fade it away.
That's the
whole
thing.
point
it's crazy.
The whole point was they took it. I believe they used the first round pick on him.
They did use a first round pick. It was like
so
the 22nd overall pick.
If you're going to draft him with your first overall pick, and as a player, he's massive. He can easily slot, not easily, but he should be able to slot into the exact role of Mike Williams on a Kellen Moore offense. It screams like he should be the guy, but Palmer has done it so consistently where for me, I'm still going to lean Palmer, but I wouldn't fault you for taking Quentin Johnston. First round pick. I think both are worth the roster spot.
I think if you're going to keep your league, I think you need to roster Quentin Johnston.
Yes.
And if your team already looks solid, through 3 weeks kind of what your holes are and what your holes are not. So if you're 3-0 and you're 2-1 and you scored a lot of points, I think you go with Quentin Johnston because I think he's your long-term fix. But if you need a flex play for next week, I think Joshua Palmer is a fine flex play. So if Johnson's available in your league, he's going to go in the top 3 or 4 waiver claims. But if you have 9 or 10, you could pick up Palmer and slot him in as a waiver play. I don't think that's a bad play at all. Got some questions here. Joe writes, is it time to give up on Chig? I can't pronounce it, not even a try. I'm not answering this yet because you got to wait till our week 2 recap. But let's just say I'm not really high on the Titans.
Yeah, I'm with Nick. I think there's no point in rostering him at this point. At best, he's a streamable tight end. I'm not doing it.
From Dem7, should I trade Tank Dell and Mostert for Josh Jacobs?
Go ahead.
You're getting the better player. Jacobs hasn't produced the numbers that he produced last year, but he hasn't looked bad, and I just don't think they've used him efficiently. I think I'd rather have the better player here. Mostert, I don't want to bank on an injury. That just sounds mean and bad. And you can't predict an injury. But if you look at Mostert's history and the history of a lot of running backs, there's a chance that he misses some time. There's a chance that the rookie steps up and takes his role. And as much as I do like Tank Dell, I think I'd rather have Josh Jacobs, who was the rushing leader last season. I'm talking less than 12 months ago, he was the running back 1. I think I'd rather have the better player, especially if your team can afford it. If your team can't afford it, don't make the trade, but you're getting a guaranteed starter every single week.
I would not do this trade. I think take the names out of it. Look at the production. You're getting the RB1 on the highest scoring, most efficient offense in football, who's the RB1 on the season, and you're trading away a rookie wide receiver who has put up back-to-back 20-point weeks for a running back with a new quarterback who has not outscored 11 points, and I believe it's 11 that he hasn't broken this season yet. Take the names away, look at the value, right? Raheem Mostert, if he gets hurt tomorrow, Tank Dell can still outscore Josh Jacobs on the entire season. And it's not a crazy take to say that. If Tank Dell goes down, Raheem Mostert can sustain this for the rest of the season if he stays healthy. So for me, there's no way where you're getting the better player. You're getting the better name and the guy you might trust to start week to week more. But forget where you drafted everybody. Just look at where they're scoring. And you're trading the RB1 on the season and Tank Dell, who I believe is in the top 15 for wide receiver 13 in full PPR. For me, there's no way I would take this trade. I think you need to trade for a Jamar Chase first round level guy.
That's nuts. I don't think anybody trades Jamar Chase for these two. I just don't.
They're not going to do it, but there's no reason to go get Josh Jacobs, who's underperformed.
I think the reason is because Jacobs is a trade for candidate right now, and his value is only going to be this low at this point. It's only going to get higher. He's still super talented. He's not hurt. He's still super talented. He's still Josh Jacobs. He's 25 years old and was the rushing leader last year. He'll be fine. I'm not worried about Josh Jacobs. He'll be fine.
I'm not worried about him, but there's no reason to trade the RB1 in fantasy for an unproven
The reason is because you're worried about Mostert getting lapped by the rookie or getting hurt. And then Tank Dell's just an unproven rookie wide receiver at this point.
I'm not making this trade. I think you take the names out of it and there's no reason you would justify it.
I just think the justification is he was the running back one less than 12 months ago.
Also, if you drafted these two guys or have been starting these two guys, you probably have the best roster in the league. So why trade it right now? Like you drafted two league winners.
Better. I mean, to get better.
Like, but you don't get better by trading away the
RB1
and wide receiver.
If Tank Dell's not going to start in your lineup and Mostert's your flex play, you're just going to get better. You're trading for a better player in your roster.
Let's see the rest of the roster before that.
He said he lost Chubb. So right now, if his running backs are like Mostert and blank, I mean, I don't trust Mostert long term. I just don't. I trust Josh Jacobs long term. Maybe I'm leaning too much on the name.
If the trade was Mostert straight up for Josh Jacobs, that's a much more intriguing move. I'd probably pull the trigger. But
if you had Josh Jacobs, why do you do it?
For me, there's
you that trade. Are you doing it? If you have Josh Jacobs in our league and I offer you Raheem Mostert, I think you laugh in my face.
If I had Josh Jacobs.
Yes, if you have Josh Jacobs and I send you this trade right now, you consider it.
Probably. I probably do take it.
Wow. So you would rather have Raheem Mostert rest of the season than Josh Jacobs. That's what you're telling me right now.
No, as I said,
that's what you're telling me.
As I'm trying to say, Raheem Mostert and Tank Dell will average for the rest of the season 30 points per game if they are healthy and out on the field. The ceiling on any given Sunday is 20 to 30 points per each of these players. So why would I abandon safe floor, high upside for a guy that's floor so far has been under delivering in fantasy? There's no reason for me to take this trade if I have these two.
Okay. I don't think that Tank Dell is starting in a lot of lineups. Again, I'd have to see this roster. So I would trade for the running back one of last year. But again, obviously me and Nick disagree on this. So take whoever's opinion you like more.
Sure.
I won't be offended if you take Nick's opinion because Nick's right on some things and I'm right on some things. So at this point, it's the way that fantasy football works. And I've kind of learned this is there is a positive and a negative to every single player. So you have to form your own opinion based on whoever you listen to. And that's totally okay.
Yep.
On to Dominic's next question. We got a lot of questions in this chat and we appreciate that. So if you are watching live, please drop a like on this video, share that link. We appreciate that. We'll get to all your questions. This is why we want to do a live. And we're okay with deviating from the segment to answer your questions. From Dominic, trade Puka Nacua and Brian Robinson for Aaron Jones and DK Metcalf.
100%. Aaron Jones and DK, 100%.
I don't know. Puka looks really good. Puka's garnering a lot of targets. And I know that Cooper Kupp is coming back, but Stafford's going to spread the ball around. And he finally has a wide receiver, too, that he trusts. I think the Rams offense is really, really intriguing once Cooper Kupp comes back. And Brian Robinson, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but he's being treated like a running back one. Like Antonio Gibson is dead. I would drop Antonio Gibson. He's gone. Yeah, he's dead. He's dead. He's dead. Brian Robinson, though, is a guy who is a solidified running back one, and I think could end up being a league winner by the end of the season because you got a running back one in round 10. Now, Aaron Jones is hurt for another week or two. I do think he's a better back than Brian Robinson, though. A.J. Dillon has not produced while Aaron Jones has been out. And I do love DK Metcalf. I think he's the alpha over there. But the Seahawks spread the ball around, and some weeks Tyler Lockett's the alpha. Would I make this trade? I'll say yes, but I think it's a lot closer than an automatic yes. I think Puka and Brian Robinson will be very, very productive throughout the season. But I would still rather have Aaron Jones and DK.
I would totally have Aaron Jones and DK. I think you're clearly upgrading at wide receiver as good as Puka has been. The exact role he's playing is the Cooper Kupp role. When Cooper Kupp comes back, they're not paying him all that money as Super Bowl MVP to be replaced by a fifth-round wide receiver this early on in the year. He's going to come in. He's going to assume that role. And Puka will still have fantasy value, but schematically, Tutu Atwell is going to be the receiver that's out there more with Cooper Kupp in that role. So for me, as good as he's been, he's not proven enough and not solidified himself enough with Cooper out there, where I'd rather have DK Metcalf, who's a guy who's going to see the field 80% of snaps no matter what happens as long as he's out there. And for me, Aaron Jones is a better running back than Brian Robinson. He had the big week last week. This week was a poor performance and a loss. And to me, Washington's going to lose more games than win. So his two good games were in wins, 13.6 and 29. And his bad game came in a loss. And they're going to lose a lot more to me than they're going to win. So
I'm going to jump down to this. John Dennis asks, do these guys answer super questions? I'm not sure what you mean by super questions, but we answer just about any fantasy related question. So fire away. From Duffy, I think he's a Patriots fan. Trade DJ Moore for Christian Watson. I don't love the Bears at all. Like, I don't want a Bear, but DJ Moore is seeing basically all the targets from Justin Fields. I think he had another touchdown this week. I forget, might have been garbage time. He's still going to get a lot of targets. I've seen him prove it, so I think I would still rather have DJ Moore, even though I don't love it.
I want to see real quick Justin Fields' stats from this week, because I'm pretty sure in a game where he was behind the entire game, I believe he only threw for like 100 passing yards in the entire game.
It wasn't great.
So if your game script is going to be perfect for DJ Moore to have a great game, and that's the production you're going to get from your quarterback, it ain't enough to be on your fantasy team.
I also think that the Chiefs defense isn't getting enough credit. I think they're really
for sure. That's for sure.
I think most weeks you're not facing, and I'll go out and say it, the Chiefs have had a top 5 defense in the league through the first 3 weeks. Like that's the reality of the league we're looking at here. I don't care what stats or players you throw at me. Like, it's the reality we're looking at. So yeah, I would like to see,
I would trade him.
I think DJ Moore against the Bears defense has like 150 yards, 2 tutties, and he faces the Bears twice this year. I wouldn't trade him away just yet. I think his value's too low right now.
DJ Moore against the Vikings, the Lions,
the Vikings or the Lions. Both of those games, DJ Moore could have 150 yards, 2 touchdowns. That's 4 games in the year.
That's cool. Christian Watson gets the Bears secondary, the Vikings secondary.
We don't know what we're getting out of Christian Watson.
That's 6. I would take Christian Watson. I would take the trade.
I don't hate your take, but I'm not a Christian Watson guy. All right. So Dylan writes, "What's up, boys? Trade Travis Kelce. Don't like it already, but I'll keep reading it. Trade Travis Kelce and Deshaun Watson for Trevor Lawrence and Keenan Allen. Intriguing move. I have Kelce and snagged Laporta before him going off. Okay. I have Amari Cooper, Devontae Smith, Deontay Johnson at wide receiver, running backs. Okay. So also, the trade above is agreed upon. Haven't sent it yet. Other trade in another league has not agreed upon. So,
you're the first trade first.
If it's agreed upon and not sent yet, I'm not sure if you ask us to grade it or maybe you could back out of it. So, let's look at his roster right now. So, his receivers are Amari Cooper, Devontae Smith, Deontay Johnson. Johnson's out, so that's not great. His running backs are Jacob Swift, Zach Moss, and Roschon Johnson. So now, he would trade Travis Kelce and Deshaun Watson for Trevor Lawrence and Keenan Allen. I know you have Laporta there, but like, you're trading your first round pick. Kelce was your first round pick. My rule is if you're trading your first round pick who's still producing, you need to get a first round pick out of it. And Keenan Allen, as great as he was this week, he was awesome. I am going to say you just drafted Travis Kelce in the first round 3 weeks ago. You can't trade the tight end 1 this soon. Now, what you can do is you could trade Sam Laporta and you could trade Zach Moss to whoever has Jonathan Taylor. That's the move I like a lot more than trading your first round pick.
Yeah, or go get another receiver. I think your receiving core could use a little bit of work. So go package that Zach Moss and I forget who Nick and Sam Laporta over for, one of those mid receivers like a Christian Watson or a Hollywood Brown or Tyler Lockett or one of those guys with high ceiling and, a guy that can go win you a week, because Sam Laporta is catching a lot of dust on your bench, and Travis Kelce should not be the one you look to trade to start a rookie tight end.
And here's a little trick for trading, which I'll say to everybody. Do not trade for players when their value is at their highest. Keenan Allen's coming off 215 yards on 20 targets. He may have had a tutty. I don't know. He had 55 fantasy points. Tutty. That's all I know. He had 55 fantasy points. This is not the week to trade for Keenan Allen. You don't. You can't, because you're going to give up too much. It's like, think about trading as like stocks. The stock is, I just watched the movie Dumb Money, by the way. So you can't go and buy the Disney stock when Disney's at its all-time high. You can't. You can't trade for Keenan Allen right now because you're going to give up too much, because he is worth Kelce at this very moment, but I would not trade Kelce for him. So his other trade here, he said this trade he has not sent yet. Try and get Debo. No, I have Debo in a league and not happy with it. He says he has Diggs, Ayuk, Hollywood, Michael Thomas, Hopkins, and Dell. Your receivers sound great. I would not go and get Debo, and I might rather have Ayuk than him, and I have Debo in a league.
Agree with Nick entirely.
Cool. Next question from Alex Flores. Should I trade Swift for Kamara? PPR.
Nope.
No, I think Swift's going to be on a pretty high scoring offense. I'm a little worried about his touchdown production because they like to use Kenneth Gainwell for some reason within the 20-yard line, but I think I'd rather have Swift rest the season.
Yep, totally agree.
From Parker, would you do this trade? I get Waddle and Gibbs for Mixon.
Yep.
Yeah, I love it. Waddle's going to be on the highest scoring offense in the league, and I think Gibbs can score just as much as Mixon. I love it. I like this trade a lot.
Totally agree.
Great, cool. From Dave Word B, should I trade Mark Andrews for Derrick Henry? No, both of the values are pretty low. I don't want Titans. I just don't. I don't know who your backup tight end would be, but you spent a lot of capital on Mark Andrews, and his value just feels a little bit too low for me. If you're going to trade Mark Andrews, you kind of got to wait till he goes off. Both of these values are low, but I can't trade the guy you probably drafted in your first 3 rounds right now.
Well, you drafted both of them in the first 3 rounds, but yes, I'm not trading Mark Andrews at this point, and Derrick Henry is only giving you red flags so far. We'll get into the Titans a little bit later on, but Mark Andrews is averaging the 5th most points per game at the tight end position. Whether he's been struggling or not, like that's good enough for me to be, you can't be ecstatic about his pick so far, but it's going to get better. It sounds like he's still not 100% and not playing at 100%. So it'll get better for Andrews. Andrews will see better days. So will Derrick Henry. But for me, Mark Andrews is one of the only big difference makers at the tight end position in fantasy consistently. So I don't want to take that deal.
From Dylan again, 12-team full PPR. So this is his roster. He's got Anthony Richardson and CJ Stroud. Cool. You went all in on the rookies. Tony Pollard, James Cook, love it. And Khalil Herbert as well. Spears, Elijah Mitchell. Then for the wide receivers, he's got Stephon Diggs, Brandon Ayuk, DeAndre Hopkins, Michael Thomas, Hollywood Brown, Tank Dell, Mark Andrews. Trades, wide receiver 2 and 3 upgrades. Who'd you package? What kind of player? I mean, I kind of like what you got. I mean, your receivers are pretty solid there with Diggs, Ayuk, Michael Thomas, Hollywood. I don't love Hopkins, but I think you're stuck with him at the moment. You have a good tight end. Yeah, I mean, I kind of like what you got, unless you could find a way to get another quarterback.
I was going to say maybe upgrade the quarterback or get another, more of that running back depth. I mean, a guy like Jacobs or Henry is a good trade low candidate now, like a good guy to target, and hope that they do see better days. Maybe a Jonathan Taylor. The guys I'd look to pivot from are DeAndre Hopkins, maybe Michael Thomas and Hollywood.
Nobody wants them though. That's the issue.
Yeah.
You don't want them either.
Sure. Fair enough.
From John. So let's see. Okay. So this is his roster. He has Mahomes, Najee, Miles Sanders, AJ Brown, Waddle, Christian Watson, and Kelsey. I got DJ Moore, Hollywood, Jonathan Johnson, and Laporta. So I'm assuming that's his entire roster. What running back should I target for Laporta or Kelsey? So, John, I'm going to come back to your question. Please just confirm that this is your entire roster. I'm sorry. This isn't his entire roster. Cindy wrote, I did get an offer. Kelsey for Josh Jacobs and Zay Flowers. Nope. It's the same thing. You do not trade Travis Kelsey. You don't. I'm telling you guys, you don't trade him. Get rid of Laporta. Laporta's value is high right now. Unless you want to wait a week and see if it goes higher. He's high. He's saying here that he got an offer for Josh Jacobs and Zay Flowers. I would trade Laporta for Zay Flowers right now. Zay Flowers just had like 10 targets. I think he's averaging over like 6 targets a week now. Go trade Laporta for Zay Flowers at that point. Do not trade Travis Kelsey.
I agree. I agree with Nick entirely. That's the better move.
Going back to Dylan, says he really likes Laporta. Keenan Allen without Mike Williams is going to get peppered with targets. I agree, but his value is too high. I wouldn't trade Travis Kelsey for him.
Keenan Allen's already been peppered with targets. I'm pretty sure he's the only player in NFL history to have over 15 targets through 3 weeks, like average.
Yeah.
So he's getting peppered already. He's not getting that much more.
You can't let go of Travis Kelsey. You can't let go of the guy you drafted in your top 4 or 5. You probably drafted him in picks 1 to 5. The only way I am trading Travis Kelsey is if you have Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, McCaffrey. Like, you need to give me a star back, or you need to give me like AJ Brown and somebody else. Like, you need to give me a top 10 star. And Keenan Allen is playing like it. Don't get me wrong. But his value is sky high. It's at, again, stocks. It is at high. You can't trade for him while he's at high as much as you love seeing it.
Totally agree.
And Nick agrees. So, and you all are welcome for the questions that we are answering. I see the thank yous in the chat. From Bryce, do I trade Ramondre Stevenson and a Kane for Eckler? Did I say it wrong again?
Yeah, you said it wrong. Chan.
All right.
There you go.
Yes, because Austin Eckler is a stud and he'll be back in 2 weeks and can win you a fantasy football championship.
Nick is absolutely right on this take.
From Fernando. Hey, Fernando, good to see you back. I know we saw you with the live shows last year. I'm sorry we're not providing them again. Hopefully soon. Hey, hope you guys are good. We're doing great, I think. Maybe. Sort of. I got a trade, and it got me thinking. I received Jonathan Taylor and Jordan Addison, and I give up Amon-Ra and Kyle Pitts. Non-PPR, what do y'all think? I think Amon-Ra is one of those guys I don't want to trade right now. He's getting like 12 targets a week. I just don't think you trade it. I think he's a guy you drafted probably in your top 12. The other two guys are not guys you drafted in your top 12. I know you're in purgatory with Kyle Pitts, but Kyle Pitts shows up in London. So you play Kyle Pitts this week and then you ship him off.
I totally agree. I think Pitts is almost on the fringe of being dropped at this point.
Not this week. You play him this week.
Regardless of that, Amon-Ra for Jonathan Taylor and Jordan Addison. It's not a terrible package, but
I still wouldn't do
for me, even if Jonathan Taylor comes back like off the pup, we don't know how he's going to fit in with this team. Zach Moss has looked pretty good already. We don't know if he's going to get traded and where he gets traded to. There's no reason that the Dolphins should trade for him at this point when they're already moving the ball as well as they have. Jordan Addison, week to week, you're not going to trust starting him. He'd really have to be a flex play based on matchup. So there's so many question marks around those guys versus Amon-Ra, who Nick already told you is giving you 12 targets a week. So I'm not going to budge off Amon-Ra for that value or for that package, but similar packages. If you wanted to shop Amon-Ra and Pitts as a package, you could probably get a better trade offer, but I wouldn't totally pivot on that.
From Bryce, do I start Garrett Wilson or Christian Watson? Well, we're not sure if Christian Watson's playing and Garrett Wilson is still too talented. I would still play Garrett Wilson.
So we're gonna have the Jets hosting the Chiefs this week.
Oh yeah.
Or Green Bay hosting Detroit. I think if Christian Watson's out there, which I don't think he's going to be, I would play Christian Watson over Garrett Wilson.
Okay, that's coming from the Jet fan.
Yep.
From our man Deshaun, 16-man league. Should I start Justice Hill, Dalvin Cook, or Dylan at the flex? Who do the Ravens have this week? Do we know? I forget.
Let's see.
Let's look that up. My gut tells me to play Justice Hill because I still think he's the running back one over there.
At Cleveland, who has been shutting down.
They have been shutting down. But I don't love Cook's matchup. I think I'd almost rather go A.J. Dillon, but he's not been producing. If Jones isn't playing, I'll lean A.J. Dillon. If Jones is playing, I'll lean Justice Hill.
Yeah, and I know this is your 16. I remember from last year, you had these big leagues, and sometimes you can't get the best talent on the waivers to flex. I don't know. This is a tough one. I would probably go Dillon if Aaron Jones is out, just because you have guaranteed workload.
From Bryce, this is turning into a question show. This is fun. We'll get back to our waiver wire after these next two questions, and then we'll keep answering questions, but we do have to get in our other topics as well. Bryce, rank these three rest of the season: T. Higgins, Garrett Wilson, DK Metcalf. I think I kind of want to go DK Metcalf since I'm a homer, and he should be the wide receiver one over there. I say should because some weeks it's Tyler Lockett. Then I think we'll go T. Higgins and then Garrett Wilson, who's really had a fall from the stars with Zach Wilson as his quarterback.
I agree. I think if you asked me before the season, I would have went Wilson, Higgins, then DK. So it's funny how the whole thing flipped.
From John, thoughts on Christian Watson rest of the season? Seems like there's believers and non-believers going into the season. Hand up, I'm a non-believer, and I'm still a non-believer because he's got a hamstring injury, and I don't know what we're getting out of him.
I was a non-believer going into the season, but after seeing Jordan Love he's not a great quarterback, but he's been very, very good through 3 weeks.
He's efficient and serviceable for fantasy.
And certainly, I think he's a top 5 quarterback right now. I have more than enough faith in him. If the Christian Watson owner wanted to trade him because he's frustrated that he couldn't play him after 4 weeks, I would absolutely target him in trades.
All right. We'll keep asking those questions, guys. We're going to go back to our waiver wire segment. But again, we'll keep answering those questions. And if you're enjoying our feedback and our opinions, we're going to be live every week on a Monday or Tuesday night, depending on me and Nick's schedule. If you're on YouTube, make sure to hit that little bell to get notifications every time we go live. Subscribe, like all these videos and follow us on social media, PrimeTimeFFPod. So you know when we go live. And John says he's a believer. Well, if you're a believer, I'm not going to tell you that you're wrong because, like I said, there's positives and negatives to every player in fantasy football. It just so happens that I don't believe in him, and that's just kind of where my opinion's been. I could be wrong about a lot of things. I say it all the time. So just to recap for our wide receivers, me and Nick both really like Tank Dell as your number 2 waiver claim. Joshua Palmer is a good serviceable player for the next few weeks, but we think Quentin Johnson is going to be the better waiver claim for the rest of the season. Let's go to some other ones. Marvin Mims for the Denver Broncos, owned in 8.6% of leagues, 15 plus fantasy points in the last 2 weeks. Your thoughts on adding Marvin Mims?
I think he's a good ad, and I think he's a great start this week. He's going up against the Bears, who have been one of the worst secondaries in football. As bad as the Broncos have been, game script has been very good for them. So you have a very prime opportunity for Marvin Mims to really break out. He's looked really good the last 2 weeks. And he's got a great matchup here. So I would snag him now because next week, if he has a good matchup against the Bears, he is going to be unclaimable. He will be on the worst fantasy teams roster.
I think he's a good ad / play in 14 to 16 man leagues. I think he's a tough ad as a wide receiver 3 on an offense that isn't super duper productive. And he could end up being the wide receiver 2 or 1, but that's kind of what we're seeing.
Yeah.
So for the Packers, Romeo Doubs owned in 27.1% of leagues. 5 plus targets in deeper leagues. 5 plus targets in 2 out of 3 games and 3 touchdowns on the season. Then Jalen Reed in 21.7% of leagues. 5 plus targets in all 3 games. I'm not targeting either of them. I'm not a Packers believer. And when Christian Watson comes back, I know I'm kind of counteracting my opinion. I think it's either kind of share the wealth or Christian Watson gets the bulk of it. I don't believe in either of these guys. I won't trust them in my starting lineups.
I agree with Nick that I don't trust starting them yet. But Romeo Doubs, in the 2 games where it wasn't the runoff between the Packers and the Falcons, he has over 18 points in each of those 2 fantasy matchups. So for me, if you're putting up 18 fantasy points, you don't belong on the waiver wire. You belong on a late bench spot. And I'm not ready to flex him yet because I don't know what we're getting. But if you do need to play him, if you did experience a Mike Williams season-ending injury or something like that, and you are one of the mid-waiver guys who does need a play this week, going up against the Lions on a short week, I mean, that's a very solid matchup for him. I would love to put him out there.
For tight ends, if Sam Laporta is available, he's still available in 60% of leagues.
Yep.
If he is, go get him. That's all we got to say. Moving on, Jake Ferguson for the Cowboys, owned in 19.8% of leagues, 7 plus targets in 2 out of 3 games. Your thoughts on him as the replacement for Dalton Schultz?
He's fine. I mean, listen, the tight end position is going to be a punt as is. And he's one of the better guys to play on a week-to-week basis. So for me, why not roster him?
I think I'd take him over Kyle Pitts.
I would take him over Kyle Pitts. I would take almost any tight end at this point over Kyle Pitts. Though.
What about Luke Musgrave for the Green Bay Packers? 13.3% of leagues, 8 targets this week.
This is the problem with the tight end position. So Luke Musgrave right now is the tight end 10 in fantasy football. He is averaging 7.8 points per game. That's how horrendous the tight end position is in fantasy football. So I don't love him. I don't really want him, but listen, 8 targets out of your tight end, that is serviceable. You're waiting on the guy who gets in the end zone. So for me, I prefer the Cowboys tight end because the Cowboys to me will put up more points every single game and have more touchdown opportunity. But workload, game script should be probably more favorable to Musgrave.
So some streaming defenses. If the Chiefs defense is not owned in your league, I think they got to be a top waiver priority for you because I think they're going to score a lot of points against the Jets. They were very good against the Bears. They've been good the entire season. If you pick them up, you might just keep them on your team the rest of the season. We also have here the Pittsburgh defense versus the Houston Texans, the Rams defense versus the Colts, the Bengals defense versus the Titans, who have looked just putrid. That's going to be a really gross, low-scoring game. And the Baltimore defense versus the Cleveland Browns. So, Nick, give me your top 3. That's not KC because they're number one, and I think they're owned in a lot of leagues.
I would probably then go the Rams defense against the Colts. Zach Moss has been fine, but he has not seen Aaron Donald in front of him. When you take away the running game from that team, the receiving options are quite thin. I do think the Rams are going to look pretty good in this game. I think they're going to not wipe the floor with them, but I think you have a clear coaching mismatch with Sean McVay. I think rookie quarterback going up against that
And the
front
Rams
seven
are
is not going
due
to.
for a win. They lost the last 2 games. They're due for a win.
And they've looked good in all 3 of their games so far. So, not so much last night, but they've
They
looked
look
pretty good
bad.
in
They
all the
just
games. So
tough
yeah,
matchup.
it happens. I would go to the Rams first. Number 2, I would go to Baltimore against Cleveland. Deshaun Watson's been turning the ball over a lot, and even though the Browns look like they were clicking last week, I do not expect them to be as efficient without Nick Chubb out on that field. I expect them to be turning the ball over a fair amount, and Baltimore's defense has been very, very good. They should bounce back from that Colts game. And my number 3 would be the Bengals defense, just because I think it's super conservative. Tannehill, another guy prone to throwing the ball all over the field. Derrick Henry has not looked great. Tajay Spears has not looked great. DeAndre Hopkins has not had enough opportunity. So the Bengals should pretty easily control this ball game and force the ball and turnovers. So for me, they seem to be the safest pick.
I agree with what Nick just said. So Brooks says he's a Watson truther as well. Listen, I'm not going to tell you guys you're wrong because he could come back and put up a really good season. I haven't seen it yet. Moving on to our week 3 recap. We're going to go through each game. We're going to talk about the biggest injuries and our biggest fantasy takeaway from each game. So let's go to Thursday Night Football. The Giants hit the Niners. This game, exactly how I thought it would go. Saquon Barkley is progressing. Should be good to go for week 4, but we don't exactly know what's going to happen. That's going to be Monday Night Football against my Seahawks. Deebo Samuel, you wrote here you missed practice with a rib injury. Have they practiced yet? I don't think they practiced yet.
The projection is he was going to miss practice.
Okay, so he's projected to, but we're not sure exactly how that will affect him. And Ayuk should practice and be good for week 4. So just stuff to monitor. So, what's your biggest takeaway from this game?
I don't think there was much to take away. Like we know the Giants offense is not good, and we know the San Francisco offense is very good.
Yep.
We know the San Fran defense is going to shut down teams very, 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 very easily, especially against average to below average offenses, and the Giants definitely fit that category. So, not too much to learn. I mean, you pretty much know exactly what you're going to get.
Yep, and like I always say, 2 San Francisco 49ers players will play excellent. So Deebo, Kittle, and McCaffrey all had really good games. And Ayuk wasn't there, so he was the odd man out.
Yep.
Sean has a question. 12-man, half PPR. My running backs are CMC and Madison. Should I package wide receivers? I have a better for running back 2. Wide receivers are Olave, Waddle, McLaurin, London, Sky Moore. Other backs are Keeley and Charbonnet. Yeah, if you could get another running back, I would. I'm okay with tossing Terry McLaurin to the Wolves, and I'm okay with Drake London getting off your team once he has another good game.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think if you could pull off a London McLaurin package and go get one of the mid-wide running backs, like one of those guys in that 16 range, maybe Aaron Jones. That owner would want
Josh
to get
Jacobs. I'm telling you, Josh Jacobs is a good trade target right now.
I don't think the Jacobs owner makes that deal.
I don't think so either. But if you find a disgruntled Jacobs owner, he's a guy to go attack right now.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's a good one. Derrick Henry, of course. If you're,
I think Jonathan Taylor, if you believe in him coming back.
Yep, exactly.
All right. Next game. Let's see what we have on the docket. Indianapolis Colts against the Baltimore Ravens. Mark, and what is your biggest takeaway from this? I don't think we had any. Justice Hill is going to be questionable for next week. Odell is questionable. Doesn't really matter to me. I don't think he should be rostered. And Anthony Richardson did not play. He is questionable for week 4. So what is your biggest takeaway from this one?
This seemed like a wacky game where the Colts kind of somehow miraculously pulled off the upset of the century against John Harbaugh with Gardner Minshew with a worse offense and a worse defense. My only concern really is the Ravens cannot push the ball down the field as much as we wanted them to. Zay Flowers did have 8 catches this past week, but only 48 yards. The average pass that Lamar Jackson is throwing is around 6 yards per completion. So they're not getting the ball downfield, and having the running backs hurt and opening up that deep passing game and missing, I believe they were out Bateman and they were out Odell in the game. So your passing options have become very thin. Your running options have become very thin. So keep your eye out on Baltimore. If you're not in a keeper type format, I do think Zay Flowers is a good player to trade away because the consistency has been there, but I don't think the ceiling is going to be as high as we had expected for his rookie year.
I really disagree, and I think he's the number 1 target over there. Zach Moss, back-to-back games of 20 points, really effective. And I'm a Mark Andrews drafter, and I'm bummed about it. I wish I had it. I think he was overdrafted. I wish I had targeted TJ Hawkinson, who I did think was going to be the tight end 2 to finish the season. I don't know why I didn't reach for him. I should have trusted my gut on that. And maybe it's an overreaction, but I think he was a little bit overdrafted, and I think he's going to be fine, but I don't think he's going to perform to the ADP that was around DK Metcalf, Keenan Allen, T. Higgins. I just don't, and that's disappointing. Next game, Tennessee Titans at the Cleveland Browns. No injury news for this one. What was your big takeaway?
The Browns offense looked better, a little bit improved. Their defense looks phenomenal. But it was also against, in my opinion, the second or third worst offense, and probably the worst non-Zach Wilson starting quarterback in the NFL with Ryan Tannehill.
I hate the Titans. I've said it for a while. They're not the team for me. They're boring. They're not for me. And Hopkins is just like, he's kind of screwed there. Maybe he wanted more money, but I don't know what he was like thinking. That Ryan
he went to the place where wide receivers go to end their days. Like,
yeah, I'm not really sure why that was the choice that he made. I think he wanted money. I don't know. Again, his choice.
He wanted New England, and New England wouldn't give him an extra $2 million.
I don't know why he would want New England, though. I think there's other options out there, but whatever. Cooper had a really big game, and no running back looked good. 2 good run defenses. Jerome Ford looked okay. I know he had the reception, but no running back in this game on either side. Really did look good. Next game, the Atlanta Falcons at the Detroit Lions. David Montgomery didn't play. They also haven't put him on IR, which is really interesting because he did say it would take a couple weeks, but maybe it won't. So that's good news for Monty owners like myself. So what was your biggest takeaway from this one?
Listen, we've gone on about it. I said it after week 2. Drake London, the 6 for 60 and a touchdown. It does seem like a one-off, and I do think that there's a real argument that he can get cut if you have Tank Dell or Achane available. I mean, his 3 games were 0, 18, and 5.1.
I think somebody would want him, though. Before you cut him, you got to try to trade him. Somebody
sure. You could look to trade him, but I mean, he is not going to be a trustworthy starter. I don't think at any point this season, unless if Heineke does get the rub and gets the start for the rest of the year. But it doesn't look like that's going to happen because the Falcons are going to win close to 10 games this year. So why bench him?
Deshaun says he got offered Swift for McLaurin and Josh Kelly in that league. Do I accept? No, I think you're giving up a little bit too much. See if they could package something with that.
Josh Kelly's been the worst starting running back in the league.
He's been bad.
And horrendously awful. Like, to me, that's a guy that could probably wind up on your waivers anyway. So
but he's getting rid of him. So I mean, that's okay.
So
it's really McLaurin for Swift.
Yeah, exactly. So,
and I think I'd still kind of rather have McLaurin. I think. My biggest takeaway from this game is that Sam Laporta is great. 84-1, and the points keep increasing. And if you did bank on him, kudos to you. And I don't think he's available on any more waiver wires. Joe, if you're asking live trade discussions with me and Nick, respectfully, no, we are not going to spend our time on the show doing that. You have our phone numbers, just being honest here. The Saints at the Packers. Aaron Jones is limited in practice, or should be limited in practice this week. Christian Watson could be limited or could not practice. We don't know yet. It's Tuesday. Derek Carr has a shoulder sprain. He will be week to week. We're expecting my man Jameis in week 4. Oh yeah, I love me some Jameis. And Jamal Williams went to the IR with a hammy, but Kamara is back from his suspension. So you don't want any other running back on the Saints. So there you go. Your biggest takeaway from this one?
Both of these teams look like the 4 through 6 seed in the NFC. And they are so average at football in every aspect. I think the Saints really need
the Saints defense is really good, I think.
The Saints defense is good, and the Packers defense has been pretty good. I think Kamara this week is going to either really open up that offense for Chris Olave and Michael Thomas to really break out, because Jamal Williams, he was good at the goal line last year. And when they brought him in, I believe in the game where he got hurt, he had 9 carries for 29 yards. they're very inefficient on the ground and they have not been good. So if Kamara can open that up, and all the reports from camp are that it was very good, you're going to be looking at a whole new offense. And I do think Chris Olave and Michael Thomas, I think they're very sneaky trade for candidates with Kamara coming back, because that field is going to open wide up if Kamara is going to be underneath catching balls and being as explosive as he was and as training camp reports were.
So if you listen to the show, I'm very high on Olave. Have been high on Olave the entire offseason. I wanted him everywhere. Through the first 3 games, he's averaging 7 targets a game and 100 yards per game. So he's averaged to basically get you 7 receptions, not targets. If you stretch this out through 17 games, he's going to average 119 receptions and 1,700 yards. That's not going to happen. Before the season, I told you he was probably going to score 10 touchdowns and like 1,400 yards. Now, here's the thing. If we did stretch his stats out through 17 games, he would also have 0 touchdowns. He's following the DJ Moore strategy. I'm not super worried. He's been targeted a ton in the end zone. Just hasn't happened. He'll have that day where he has a couple touchdowns. But Olave looks excellent, and I am very happy to have him on, I think, 2 of my teams. And I don't know. I have too many teams. The Houston Texans at the Jacksonville Jaguars. No real injuries in this one. What's your biggest takeaway? And we'll
the
get
Jags suck
after this game, by the way.
The Jags suck. I mean, they have been awful. Trevor Lawrence has been awful. They put a lot of money into an offense and a lot of high value draft capital in pass catchers and running backs, and they suck. I mean, they have been absolutely miserable on defense. Letting up 37 to Stroud is horrendous. The week prior against Kansas City, who we agree is a great defense, put up only like 9 points. I think the Jags fans are in for a rude awakening, that this team is not as good as we thought. And this week they're going to host Atlanta, who is going to manage the clock. I think Jacksonville is due for a horrendous game.
Nope.
Calvin Ridley is not having his revenge game.
It's a home game.
Calvin Ridley. It's in London.
It's a home game. It's a home game. It's a home game.
London.
It's a home game.
It's in London. What does that mean?
The Jags home stadium is in London. It's a home game. Have you seen the Jags fans in London? That's a home game.
No, it's not a home game.
I'm telling you, watch the game Sunday. We're going to talk next week. We're going to talk next week. I want you to see the crowd with the green that's going to show up. I'm telling you that it's a home game. The owner kind of wanted to move them to London. It's a home game.
It's not a home game.
It is. It's going to sound like a home game.
Calvin Ridley, after the first 2 quarters of football, only has 80 receiving yards for the rest of the season.
Yeah.
As high as and confident as we were in him, I mean, before the year, I liked him.
He was not me.
You took your take right back after week 1. I did.
You're right. I did. I did apologize for my overreaction.
Okay,
week 1. And
well,
I also said, no, because I said at the beginning of that show, the week 1 means nothing, and there's a lot of overreactions.
Well, you said it wasn't. You said it was real.
So my friend who's a Jags fan, shout out to my boy Vinny. He basically said to me, the Jags are not going to be that good this year as people expect because they put no money into the defense. Yeah, he kind of knows his team. So my 2 takeaways, we spoke about Tank Dell enough, so I'm going to take that note out. I was high on Christian Kirk for the season. He had a better game than Ridley back-to-back weeks. I'm not saying he's going to do that the entire season, but I did say I'd rather have Christian Kirk in round 7 than Calvin Ridley in round 3. I shouted it from the mountains, and I did say week 1 I might have been wrong, but I'm just saying. I was saying that a lot on this show when I have no shares of Calvin Ridley. I also have no shares of Christian Kirk. From Dominic, last question. I just traded Brian Robinson and Dameon Pierce for Aaron Jones and Tank Dell. Is that a good deal? I think so. You got the best player in Aaron Jones in the deal. Tank Dell looks really good. I don't want Dameon Pierce at all. I like Brian Robinson, but yeah, I like the deal. Good trade.
Yep, I agree.
Next game, Nick, I think we could skip this one. I think you have 0 thoughts on this one, so we could skip it. Denver Broncos at the Miami Dolphins. As far as injuries, Waddle's in concussion protocol, but looking at the score, I feel like the ghost of Waddle's out there somewhere. Salvon Ahmed will probably return this week. We'll see what that means for the running back situation, but I'm not worried about him. So, Nick, I'll let you go first. Your biggest takeaway from a fantasy football perspective, not a football perspective.
If I told you before the season that the Dolphins were going to hang 70 points on the Denver Broncos' head, what would you have thought was different about the team? What would you have thought? You would have thought maybe they landed Jonathan Taylor in that trade.
I would have thought that the entire secondary tore their ACL.
You would have thought there might have been a hurricane. You would have thought COVID was going around the defense or the entire coaching staff. No, the only difference was the second best playmaker on that offense was out. It makes zero sense how horrendously bad that the defense for the Broncos fell off an absolute cliff. But I'm all here for it. I cannot wait for my Week 5 Super Bowl where the Jets get to go to Denver and this Nathaniel Hackett and Zach Wilson-led offense get to absolutely embarrass the Denver Broncos. That's the only thing I want this season. For fantasy purposes, we did an episode last year where we said, what are the 5 offenses you want a piece of? I mean, the Dolphins are the offense that you needed a piece of this year.
Yeah.
We didn't talk about him, but the tight end for the Dolphins, might be a good guy to go add on your team just because you want a tight end that's going to have the opportunity to score early and often. And the Dolphins have been the number 1 offense in football by an absolute mile so far this season. So for me, that's the thing I'm going to be targeting going into this waiver wire week if I have one of the better teams in fantasy football.
So I'm glad you didn't mention this because I'm going to mention it. Every year there's a quarterback that's drafted in round 8 to 12 that ends up being a stud. And that's your league winner. Cam Newton in 2015, Jalen Hurts last year, Dak Prescott, I think did it a couple years ago.
Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, 2020.
Tua Tagovailoa. That's your league winner, ladies and gentlemen. If you went in on Tua and you had the mindset of, I'll draft Tua, hopefully he doesn't get hurt. Well, you know what? You're reaping the rewards. I wish I had the balls to do it. I wish I did. I wish I did do it. And I considered it in a couple leagues. And this is the one year that I really took my quarterback early in every single league. I took Jalen Hurts in round 2 of a 12-man keeper league. I have Burrow in a dynasty league. I didn't take him, obviously, but I took Burrow in another league. I took Herbert, my favorite stat sheet stuffer, in another league. And my final quarterback is, let's see, Burrow, Herbert, and who else was I rooting for this week? Crap. I can't remember my other quarterback. Let me give me 30 seconds. I know it's not this league because this is going to
well, you talk about that. I know you
it's Fields. It was that bum Justin Fields. That bum was not performing to his ADP. Rotten. That was a rotten quarterback pick by me. We'll get there. Nick's right. Okay, but anyway, Tua has 27 plus fantasy points in 2 out of 3 weeks. The only week he didn't was against the Patriots. Low scoring game. Cool. Not worried about it. Tua looks awesome. He looks awesome. And I've kind of been a Tua defender, but also been a Tua against him. I've been half and half. I've been wishy-washy, but Tua looks awesome. And if you drafted Tua, and as long as he stays healthy, I hate saying that, but as long as he stays healthy, I think you win your fantasy football championship if you drafted Tua in round 10. All right, moving on. The Los Angeles Chargers against the Minnesota Vikings in the shootout that we all knew it would be. Your thoughts on this one?
You just talked about Tua being a league winner, but I don't hear you talking about the real QB1 and QB2, the only 2 guys ranked above Tua this season in Kirk Chains and Justin Herbert, your favorite stat sheet stuffer.
I love these 2 stat sheet stuffers. I do. I root for Kirk Cousins, especially after watching the quarterback show, but he is a stat sheet stuffer.
I agree. I love Kirk after that show. And I can't wait for the Jets to hopefully go after him for a 4th round pick and expiring deal. But we know it's not going to happen. This is not the NBA where we get things that make us happy.
He's going to be a 49er next year, and I'm going to rip my hair out.
Oh my God! Please no! Don't let
one of my buddies.
Nah, Purdy's been too good. They're not going to abandon Purdy. Anyway, your stat sheet stuffer.
His former coach.
Your stat sheet stuffer. I am going to defend Justin Herbert one last time. Well, I say one last time. One more week in a row on this show. Justin Herbert in his career has played 13 total games with Mike Williams and Keenan Allen out on the field. And now he just loses one of them for the entire course of the season. It's heartbreaking that Mike Williams is gone again, another year, but this is the one year where I'm going to say he can prove himself. Outside of Kansas City, that division is very weak between the other 2 teams. The opportunity is there for them to make the playoffs. You have the Bengals, who started 0-2, obviously won. The Jets have their quarterback go down for the year. Pittsburgh doesn't look as good as people predicted, who people thought would be a fringe team.
Yeah, but the Dolphins
Jacksonville isn't great. Like, there's plenty of opportunity to make the playoffs. So I'm going to say it now. Justin Herbert, I'm calling you out. I'm holding you to a higher standard than I have the last 3 years because the opportunity is there. I know you lost your receiver, but the talent is there on that offense. The only thing I will say is that the defense has got to get better. That defense has got to get better under that horrendous coaching, and he should still be fired after the win.
Well,
Staley.
I don't know about that. I forgot to mention the injury. Sorry, guys. Mike Williams is out with the ACL. Did mention it at the beginning of the show, and Cam Akers is expected to make his debut for the Vikings in week 4. Have a day, Keenan Allen. He was great. Herbert, I wrote good game and the W. Good for him. Josh Kelly stinks. That's my note. I'm not starting him again. Against a really bad rush defense and just terrible. Alexander Mattison, very worried about him, especially after the news of the trade. He went 93 rushing yards, no touchdown. That's okay, not his fault. And 5 receptions for 32 yards. I still think he's the running back 1, but he has to play better to keep that job. I'm not super worried about Cam Akers because Madison did just play well, and they chose Madison over. They did choose Madison over Dalvin Cook before the season, so I'm not. My level of worry is at like a 4. If he played bad this week, it'd be like an 8. Your thoughts on your worry for Madison? I know you're an owner of him.
I mean, listen, he's going to be more of a matchup-based play. I said last week I said it 2 weeks ago. I don't like the Eagles matchup. I said this past week I love the Chargers matchup, and he had a very solid fantasy day. It's always going to be a matchup-dependent play. I'm not worried about Cam Akers the first week. There's no way he's going to memorize that whole offense and come out there and be shining lights against the Carolina Panthers. So
Madison should have a day.
Madison should be good. I mean, the Vikings, this should be their first win of the season, undoubtedly against Andy Dalton, unless if Thielen goes for his revenge tour.
Oh yeah.
But anyway, listen, Madison's going to be matchup-based play every single week, and there's enough solid running backs getting enough workload where you should have the depth on your team to replace him if you need.
If there's one game I don't want to talk about, it's this one. Patriots at the Jets. They signed Trevor Siemian today, so maybe he'll play. I got nothing. My fantasy takeaways, I don't want to play anybody, including Ramondre Stevenson. This is why I was kind of low on Ramondre Stevenson. I don't have anything for you. Like, Breece Hall looks bad. The offense looks bad. They can't move the ball. Even you as a Jets fan was kind of saying that Garrett Wilson is really matchup based and it's really tough to start him. Like, these are 2 teams I just don't want any fantasy shares of right now.
I totally agree with that. I mean, last year this game finished 10-3. This year finished 15-10. And for some reason, Randall Cobb is out there on a Hail Mary, drops the potential game-winning play. Like, for me, I think there's too many things that are broken about both of these offenses at the moment. Ramondre is the only one that I would trust playing week to week. I know he hasn't been great for fantasy yet, but he's out on the field. He's getting opportunity. And I mean, I said before the year, and I've said it every single week, that Jets front 7 is going to be the best in the league outside of San Francisco. So there's no surprise he did not have a great day on the ground in this matchup.
Bills at the Commanders. This was a walloping. Your big takeaway from this one?
I think a lot of people overreacted to Bills week 1, and we said,
yes, week 1. Yep.
Yeah, week 1. And since then, they've been the number 1 offense in football. That's not the Miami Dolphins. We are going to have an absolute shootout haymakers this week as we get the Dolphins at the Bills. That should be the most entertaining game of the week. I expect that to be on Red Zone more often than all the other games. Listen, that Diggs and Allen duo, there was no reason to fade them. I know Diggs, a lot of people got stale on and didn't want to take him and didn't like the attitude before the season. There's no lack of chemistry there. The 2 of them have been very good for fantasy. And sure, maybe Josh Allen isn't the number 1 quarterback or number 2 that you drafted him to be, but Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts, they're not playing much better. And if you take out that week 1 game, Josh Allen's averaging a cool 23.5 points per game. So there's no problem. He's going to bounce back. He's going to play Miami. He'll have a phenomenal game, and he'll probably wind up in the top 5 quarterbacks on the season.
My other little note is that James Cook had 98 rushing yards, had a touchdown robbed again. So McDermott, what are you doing? You're doing my boy dirty because you know he's going to want a nice contract in 2 years. But aside from that, yeah, yep. Alrighty, Carolina Panthers at the Seahawks. The Red Rifle Andy Dalton played in place of Bryce Young with an ankle injury. I was very scared of the Red Rifle, but the Seahawks prevailed, luckily in the typical Seahawks fashion. Your big takeaway from this one?
Adam Thielen, the geezer. He
Apologize.
He proved me a big part of the take is I said that Bryce Young was not going to be good for him, and the Red Rifle delivered. I still don't like Adam Thielen. I don't either,
but he got me 30 fantasy points.
I don't think there's any week you're going to confidently say I want Adam Thielen in my lineup at any point this season. Right. This week might be the matchup where you do get it against the Vikings secondary, but you will not trust him at any point week to week on the rest of the season. He is rostered in almost every single league. The other guy on that team I do think needs to get rostered, needs to get a look at is DJ Chark. He was hurt before the season, did not do much of training camp at all, and then came in week 3 with Andy Dalton. I think he had a very solid day. So he's a guy that I think I'm keeping my eye out on. If you had multiple injuries and you're in a deeper league, he's definitely worth a stash in the waiver wire ad.
My other note is that Kenneth Walker is awesome so far. He's like the running back 3 on the season. I faded him because of injuries. Yeah. And I tried to talk myself into Charbonnet because I was so annoyed that they took him in the draft when they had Kenneth Walker. And I'm like, why are you spending a 2nd-round pick? So as a Homer Seahawks fan, I did try to talk myself into Charbonnet somehow lapping Kenneth Walker, but I just don't think that happens. I think Pete Carroll just likes having 2 really solid running backs because Charbonnet looks good. I like that run that he had. Late in the 4th quarter where he just sent a defender flying like beast mode. Like he looks good. Like he didn't look bad, but it's like Kenneth Walker looks really good. So it's like, you can't just like take him out, but I don't know. It's good for football. I guess it's good for the football team because there's always going to be a fresh runner in there. It's going to pound the defense. So
Kenneth Walker's looked phenomenal this year. Like he's absolutely broken out in his 2nd year.
And he's catching balls. Like he's even catching balls. So as a Seahawks fan, it's great. As a fantasy analyst, like I kind of was wrong on that one. Okay. Dallas Cowboys at the Arizona Cardinals. Injuries for this one. I'm in the wrong notes, so that's why a little bit of a delay. No injuries for this one, but what was your biggest takeaway besides the fact that crazy NFL stuff happens?
James Conner has been very good for fantasy. I think me and Nick were both fairly high.
Both all over him. I was going 0 running back in every league, so I was targeting. I was talking to a friend last night. I was targeting guys like Madison, Swift, Connor, Montgomery, and I didn't get Connor anywhere. I wanted him, just the way that the draft fell to me just didn't happen.
Yeah, I agree. I got him in a couple places, but for me, not enough. Last 2 weeks, 16 and 17, he's getting a ton of passing down work. Josh Dobbs, has been an absolute monster for that team.
He's so funny. He's so funny. Did you see his TikTok that he responded to Micah Parsons with? Micah Parsons basically said on his like YouTube show or whatever he does, like, Josh Dobbs, better watch out. I got darts coming at you. And Josh Dobbs had posted TikTok of that and goes into like darts coming at me going, hoo, 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 hoo. And the darts are like missing him. It's really funny.
That's funny. The Cardinals, we're a fantasy show. We're not going to get too much into football, but that offense is really good. And Caleb Williams, I know he doesn't want to.
No. It's good enough to not get Caleb Williams. We're not doing this. I'm not believing in this.
If they have the number, if Arizona or the Texans, because they have the Texans pick, wind up with the number 1 overall pick.
Nope.
You got to pull the trigger.
I'm not talking myself into this because I love Caleb Williams. I'm a USC guy, and I can't.
You don't want to see him in your division.
I don't want to see him in my division. No, go anywhere else. Any other team.
Would you rather the Rams suck and get him in the 1st round, or would you rather the Cardinals suck and get him in the 1st round?
Neither of them.
Okay.
Neither. My actual answer is the Cardinals.
He's going to be a Bear. He's going to be a Bear.
That's so bad.
The Panthers or the Bears are going to have the number 1 overall pick.
Make him a Viking.
And he's got both.
They're cool. I like the Vikings. Make him a Viking.
You're going to see him in the NFC next year. End of story.
Yeah, but the Seahawks aren't winning a Super Bowl anytime soon, so that's fine. My big takeaway is I drafted Tony Pollard pretty high. 3 receptions for -1 yards. That's no good. It's really no good. We need more receptions and reception yards from Mr. Breakaway Speed over there, and more touchdowns.
Breakaway.
On to the Chicago Bears at the Kansas City Chiefs.
This absolute mollywhopping.
I mean, I'll be honest, the game didn't matter. Taylor Swift was there. Like, nothing else mattered in that game. Nothing. Like, Mahomes broke a record. Andy Reid broke a record. Taylor Swift was at the game, and that's literally what was the #1 trend on Twitter for like 3 days.
And Travis Kelce jersey sales up 400%. Way to go, Swifties.
But from a fantasy standpoint, the Bears really stink. They really, really, really stink, and you could play any defense against them, I think. And all 3 Chiefs running backs scored in typical Chiefs fashion. So those are my fantasy takeaways.
I got to say this, and it's the one thing that I do not want to say. If Justin Fields was going up against San Francisco this week, or the Cowboys, you're probably dropping him for Baker Mayfield or a Kirk should have been gone. Jared Goff, maybe.
You don't drop him, but you don't play him.
I mean, he's the QB. I want to say 18 or 20.
You can't drop him. You're 3 weeks.
He's been horrendous, and he gets Denver this week. If he doesn't show out this week, you can drop him. I hate to say it, but
I hate to say it too because I drafted him, and Nick kind of sold me on it.
He was my guy, one of my guys this year.
And he was very good last year. He's very, very good. Sunday Night Football, Steelers at the Raiders. Really funny. The Raiders lost the game, but all their fantasy players were pretty effective, and the Steelers fantasy players were not. That's how the NFL works. Fun. Your biggest fantasy takeaway, though?
Yeah, both these teams suck. They need upgrades at quarterback. Devontae Adams should request a trade, and he should become a New York Jet and join.
No, he shouldn't. No, he should not request a trade. That'd be horrible for his fantasy value right now.
Nope, he should become a Jet, and he should team up with Kirk Cousins, and then Aaron Rodgers the following year. Listen, none of these guys on these teams, their quarterbacks, for the Steelers, the quarterback, Pickett, absolutely not good. They're winning games in despite of Kenny Smallhands. And
he's a game manager. He's managing the games well enough.
The run game is awful. The offensive line is awful. The quarterback is awful. The defense let them get cooked. They have no reason why they should have won this game. Neither of these teams should have won this game. I think both these teams, I think the Steelers are playing way better than their record, or playing way worse than their record.
Well, that's coaching.
I think the Raiders, if they didn't edge out the Broncos and score 17 on a defense that just allowed 70, we'd be having a lot more serious discussions and not looking at a 1-2 record.
You want to hear my take? If you traded Mike Tomlin to the Bears, Justin Fields ends up being a top 5 fantasy quarterback next week.
Mike Tomlin to the Bears?
Mike Tomlin to the Bears, and the Bears make the playoffs. That's how much I believe in Mike Tomlin.
I mean, he's one of the goats.
I think the coaching for the Bears is atrocious. And just to be clear, Matt Canada sucks too. But I think the coaching for the Bears is horrendous.
Yeah.
Nick, are you going to apologize to Devontae Adams this week? Or how many weeks are we going to go by? I'm just curious. I don't know why you keep fading this guy.
Let's see. Chargers, he's going to cook them this week. Hey, let's be fair, though. If he didn't have 30 this week, he scored 20 points on the season.
But he got a concussion. He was out in the second game.
He had a breakout game against a poor secondary.
No, he had 17 fantasy points week 2 with the concussion.
No, he stinks. He stinks.
You need to apologize, my friend.
One of these weeks I'm not ready to apologize.
I don't know what you got against Devontae Adams. He hasn't lost you any championships. He's a good guy. I don't understand your hate against Devontae Adams. I don't.
No, I don't hate him. I definitely won't hate him when he becomes a Jet and joins Aaron Rodgers. But
all right. And Jacoby Myers is also a weekly starter. And the Steelers running backs are terrible. They're just Najee looks bad. Yeah. All right. Monday, and also Jimmy G has a concussion. I'm not sure how much that matters, but he has a concussion. We might see Nathan Peterman next week. I don't know who their backup is. I really don't.
It's the rookie, the 5th round rookie.
Oh, okay, cool.
The guy that got hyped in preseason.
Monday Night Football. You said the Eagles played with the flu. I didn't hear about this, so enlighten me.
The whole offense, apparently. I heard Jason Kelce, Jalen Hurts. They had the flu game.
They had the flu game where they dropped 30 points in the pouring rain on the Bucs, I guess. Sure. I mean, my biggest fantasy takeaway is that Swift is your weekly starter now, if he wasn't already. He just doesn't get used in the red zone. And AJ Brown, 9 for 131. Awesome stat line.
I just have one prayer after this week. First off, Mike Evans has been that dude. I'm
Probably
so
the
hyped.
biggest steal of the draft. I mean, it's him, Tua, and like Connor. I mean, if we're making an all steal the draft team, I would say it's like Tua, Connor, Swift, Mike Evans. I don't know another receiver. Give me another receiver and like Laporta. I mean, that might be your all steal team right there.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, probably. I'm gonna say one prayer about this man. Do not get hot-headed this week against the Saints, because it's the one thing you do every year, which rubs us the wrong way and
Suspension
underdelivers
coming
for our fantasy team. So, and it could get you suspended. Just please cook Lattimore and do not beef. That's the only thing I'm going to ask. I'm going to ask one thing of you this season outside of delivering for my fantasy team.
All right. Last game, the Rams at the Bengals. Joe Burrow is a warrior playing on the injured calf. He didn't look wonderful, but I don't think he looked terrible.
Warrior.
He was a warrior. He shouldn't have played that game, and he did. You're very anti-Burrow. He's a warrior.
He's not a warrior. What has he done to be a warrior?
What did Rodgers do? He didn't come back in that game. He could have stood. He could have thrown a couple.
He could have stood with a torn Achilles.
Yep, he could have thrown. Kobe did.
Horrendous take.
I'm being ridiculous. Everybody knows I'm being ridiculous. Burrow played through a freaking injury against a tough defensive line. And the Bengals didn't look great as an offense. Besides Jamar Chase. We talk a little bit of football on the show, and we have to talk football sometimes for fantasy. I think the Bengals look very, very out of sync. T. Higgins looked like he didn't want to be there, kind of. Joe Mixon in the line, I guess, looked good, but I don't think they look in sync. I don't know if it's Zach Taylor's play calling, but they're not firing on all cylinders right now. And I'm confident that they will, but it just wasn't this week. And it won't be next week either, because the Titans play them very tough. The Bengals will win, but it's a tough game.
I'm going to do something. I'm going to make my statement on the Bengals.
Okay.
And we know every year I make one statement on the Bengals for the last 3 seasons of this podcast, and they always outdo it. So before I say my take, either Jamar Chase is now going to go off for the rest of the year, Burrow's going to finish as the top 3 quarterback, and all will be well for my fantasy team, or what I'm going to say is going to actually happen. I do not think the Bengals are making the playoffs this year. That offense looks horrendous. That defense was able to shut down the Rams, who have practically no real starting worthy player on other NFL rosters, in my opinion.
Disagree.
I do not think that this team is nearly as good as they were advertised. And I don't think it's just a Burrow problem. I think that team's got a lot deeper issues outside of that. I think you have a very frustrated receiver in T. Higgins, who you chose not to pay. He's also not giving the opportunity to, like, Joe Burrow has given him 16 targets in week 1 and week 3. He's caught, I believe, 2 balls between those 2 games, and only 4 of those balls were deemed catchable by the NFL. I think you have a very frustrated receivers. I think you're watching Tyler Boyd outperform Higgins. I know he had the big week 2, but they still lost the game. I think there's so many deep issues with that team, and I know we were talking about T. Higgins as a buy low candidate. I would sell him right now for what you could get, unless if they really fall off, start 1-4, and then trade him because they know this is the only time they'll get real trade value. I really do not think that this is going to be a very good team rest of the season.
So I'm going to answer some questions before I give my take. From B-Ball Luke says, drop Gainwell for Tank Dell, 1 billion %. Yep. Definitely do it. Love it. From Daniel, drop James Cook for Swift, not in a billion years. I love James Cook. I mean, is this an 8-man league? Maybe I'd rather have Swift now that I think about it, but like they both need to be rostered. So how many teams is your league, and can you drop somebody else? Because I want both of them on my team for the rest of the season.
Yeah, you got to have other options, unless if it's too short of a team. And if it is too short of a team, you should be packaging James Cook with somebody else to upgrade big and then add DeAndre Swift.
Yep. From Zah, are the keys droppable? I don't know what you mean by the keys, so let us know who you're talking about. Now my take on the Bengals. I think there's issues with them, but I don't think they're the issues that Nick are kind of saying. I think it just rides on Burrow's injury. If Burrow's healthy, I think they're fine. I think when Burrow starts missing games, I think they're in trouble. Now, they do have a tough schedule, but I think Nick's underselling the Rams. The Rams just almost beat the 49ers like a week ago, who looked like the best team in the league. They beat my Seahawks week 1, looked really, really good. Then they lost a close one to the Bengals. I just think they're two competitive teams, pretty evenly matched. It's kind of where they were in the Super Bowl 2 years ago, even if they don't have all the talent that they did. I just think it's two competitive teams, and I think the back half of the season will tell us a lot about the Bengals. They are going to have to face the Chiefs. They are going to have to face the Bills. They are going to have to face a couple of those teams. But then they have some easier teams. They play that entire AFC South. That needs to be 4 wins. That needs to be. You win those 4 games. That's 4 wins. They also play the NFC West. The 49ers are a real tough one. I think that's a loss. They should beat my Seahawks. They should beat my Cardinals. So right there, that's 6 more wins that they have on their schedule. And then they have to split with their division teams. They just have to. So we'll see where they go. I don't think Nick's opinion's wrong, but I don't think they're a team that's really rooted with a lot of like behind the scenes issues besides T. Higgins. I think he probably is frustrated. But he had 2 tutties last week, so it's not like he's had the worst start to the season. And I would buy low on T. Higgins because I think Joe Burrow's injury should get better unless he takes a really bad hit. Then, it is what it is. So Zaz talking about the Jets. I think Breece Hall and Garrett Wilson are the only 2 Jets you could roster right now, and it's tough to play them. It really is tough to play them.
I agree. The only other thing I would roster is the Jets defense, obviously.
Okay, that makes sense too. Well, yeah. All right. That is our show for episode 7. It was a long, beefy one for you guys listening on the podcast. But again, we had a lot of questions. We had almost 30 minutes of questions. That's why we do the live. The live will be every Monday or Tuesday night. You'll see it on our social media. If you're subscribed to our YouTube and hit the little bell icon, you're going to get a notification every time we're about to go live. So you can join the live and ask us questions. And that's why we wanted to go live, because we'd be recording anyway. Going live just benefits with questions. So hopefully you enjoyed the show and you kind of set your waiver wire and get the players that you want. And hopefully we help you with your fantasy lineups for next week. So if you did enjoy it and you're listening on an audio streaming platform, please hit that subscribe button, drop a 5-star review, whether you're listening on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or Anchor. If you're listening and watching on YouTube, drop a like on this video. We'd appreciate that. Subscribe to the channel. And again, hit that bell icon whenever we do live. If you're on social media, tell us that you enjoy the show. Tell your friends that you enjoy the show. Follow us, social media, PrimeTimeFFPod, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube is Primetime Fantasy Podcast. Thank you so much to everybody who listened. Thank you especially to those that joined in on the live chat and asked us some questions. We appreciate you. Best of luck in week 4. And we'll talk to you guys next Tuesday for sure. Actually, I'll talk to Nick about that after the show, but next week's going to be a little bit wonky. I'll be at the Seahawks game next Monday and we'll figure it out. But we'll talk to you guys next week. We'll get you something. And yeah, we'll talk to you soon. Have a great week, guys.